I think for me, like spiritual music and spiritual art, what it does is communicate something through form and affect and aesthetics um, that can't be communicated otherwise.
The spiritual sound could be whatever it is that you feel binds you to somebody or some group.
Like when you finish the album, hopefully either the feeling is I gotta hear that again, or what the hell did I just hear?
So, I am here today with Leah and Richard of the absolutely fantastic Agriculture, my latest discovery, and genuinely, I think one of the best records that has been released this year. How are you both?
Good, good. Thank you very much for having us, Tristan, and thank you for your kind words.
It's an absolute pleasure. You know, I was going to say, like, I've been trying to sort of think of all of the sort of questions, that I'd be asking, and it's kind of, I guess the first thing would be, where do you start with a record like this one? There's so much happening here, and it's such a fantastic melting pot of subgenres. How did it kind of, I guess, what was the sort of the germ that sort of led to the creation of, what we know as the spiritual sound?
I think you start with the ideas you have. So like whatever you've got, like maybe it's a riff or something, or a direction that we didn't get to explore on the last EP, or somewhere we've kind of like fantasized about the band going next. And you take that and you start building on it, and we work on it together, and then like see where that goes, and usually it ends up somewhere completely different. But it yeah, I think that's kind of where we started, and like just start with the material you do have, and then we just talked a lot about like what we wanted the album to be, and started to build a broader idea around that, which helps us come up with new ideas, come up with new songs, um, and then obviously as we work on that stuff, even that begins to change, and the broader concept change. And at a certain point, I think you just follow what the material is doing, and as that develops, you let it go where it goes, and also like try to keep some sense of focus of like, okay, where should this go? And yeah, I think that's how we ended up with like an album that packed so much in. It's like really just following, like not restricting ourselves, but maintaining that focus.
No, I 100% agree. I think, the sort of, the through line that you sort of mentioned, I think you can absolutely feel as though almost like the record is just kind of like one singular song, kind of as sort of like a cyclical kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Actually, I'm glad to hear that it comes off that way. I perceive the record in that way, and that's it's cool that you say that. It's kind of affirming in a way, because one of my things when I listen to a record, really any record that I work on, but especially this one because of the way it was and sort of the intensity of the material and stuff, it's really important to me, regardless of, like, of course, variety is important, and, all of these things, and you don't want the whole thing to sound the same, but at the same time, a kind of natural continuity, if you listen to it cover to cover and you feel like, oh, like I think it's something that we strive to do in the same way that, like, if you read a great novel or something like that, the continuity is there, in a certain way, beginning to end, it feels like a work. And one of the things for me when I'm listening to something coming off of the master desk is just like when I listen to the final, you know past like the full end-to-end tape that gets, sent to the vinyl plant, like how does this sound? Does this sound continues? Do I feel like I've sat through a whole work sort of beginning to end, and that it feels complete, but also still kind of has that variety. So that's definitely kind of like an overarching goal in general, is you want there to be a sense of continuity.
We spent a while writing some of the material on this album, like a year or so, from like the first tracks to when we were like really putting the recordings together. But like once we were recording, we really like from first studio session to like final mixes, it was a matter of a few months. And I think that really helps like give it that cohesion and that we really hit the ground running once we got in the studio to get this album together and worked like pretty nonstop in Richard's studio mixing. And I think that really like helps give it that cohesion. There's not this sort of scattered techniques and miking in different spaces and like getting different mixes on different days. It was like everything was kind of coming together at once. But yeah.
Is it kind of also is it nice to have, I feel like sometimes you can look at a painting, for example, and you can kind of overpaint, and like sort of add these little blemish, things that you think are making it better, but actually sometimes that sort of, isn't necessarily what it needs. Sometimes less is more kind of thing.
Yeah, we're pretty good at wanting to do a little bit more always, and like we're also good at uh catching each other and catching ourselves with that.
Like within the context of the band with each other, like just because you can do anything doesn't mean that you should always do everything. um and yeah, that's the sort of thing that I refer to as like the agriculture filter, is like this like funnel that everything passes through. I think it like the sieve tends to has gotten tighter and tighter, and what Leah's saying is, yeah, that's totally, we continue to get better at sort of catching each other and sort of having this sort of collective compositional intuition around that. But it's a balancing act, because you want to capture the fire, but at the same time you do want to let fresh ideas breathe. And I also totally agree with what Leah said about the sort of having limited ourselves time wise to like a chunk of time, and we were like, okay, by this date this has to be done. I think it allowed that to kind of happen in an effective way.
Mm. Oh, that's awesome. So, I wanted to kind of delve into some of the concepts of the record. So, I was wondering if you could sort of elaborate on what some of them might be.
I guess the overarching concept for the record really came out of like we're writing these songs really like last year. We were really getting into like just what that sort of conceptually would be. And I mean, things in the world being the way they are, things in the US being the way they are, just like on global political social scales, like it's quite a time to be alive. And like I think what what we were looking at was what is our role in the midst of that, because we've spent the past few years touring and making music and like yeah, really just having a creative voice that people relate to as maybe from a point of spirituality, maybe from a point of catharsis, or even just like a something uplifting or sort of aspirational. I think are a lot of things people identify in what we do. And so when we're spending that much time on the road, like doing that and engaging in the space that our shows create, and like with people who come out, like I think it really got us talking about like, okay, what is it we do and how do we do that without like being a total escapist fantasy of like what's going on in the world. And I think that's what the record came out of, was like, how do you relate meaningfully to the world in a way that is not that is honest to what's going on in every sense of the world. So it's honest to what's going on politically and socially, but also just like what's right in front of you. Like how do I show up to this Zoom interview and make it a positive experience of like sharing, of connection, of conversation. And yeah, I think that was the foundational premise behind where we went. And as lyricists, Dan and I had our own sort of uh, angles, or like are sort of in towards that. Dan writing about spiritualism through Zen Buddhism and his practice with that, and myself sort of writing around community, queer community, struggles with that, and ways of connecting through that. And yeah, I think lyrically that's sort of broadly what the album's about, is like how do we just keep living and keep a positive sense of spirituality within that.
Wow. I mean, that literally goes back to the first thing that I said when I met you both, right? Like, we're like getting through essentially, which is what I feel like the world really is like. And this record really does offer a sort of sense of realistic escapism, if that's sort of like a bit of an oxymoron, I guess. Like for me at least, because it's there's so much catharsis in there and it's very sort of deeply primal, I find as well. Particularly Bodhidharma, like that bit where it's just like the wall of silence that basically like you crash into and then those screams are just amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think something that I've been thinking about a lot with this album is like, I guess really my own relationship to extremity and extreme art, but I think something we all kind of share as a band, which is like, I think what we do, I'm really interested in extreme music, extreme art, like extreme films that kind of take you past a sort of um almost something towards the sublime, where you're experiencing something that seems completely beyond the norms of daily life. And but I think the pitfall of a lot of extreme media and extreme art is that it can desensitize, or can make you just need something more extreme, and it can become sort of a pissing contest in that way. And like I think that is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to take something that can bring you there, can like meet you there, can be an extreme experience, but then bring that elsewhere and bring that towards either a point of spirituality, catharsis, healing, uh beauty, whatever, like, but make it so it's not just creating this like craving for something more extreme at the other end.
Like, you mentioned very briefly there about films. There was kind of like a cinematic sort of quality, I feel like, to this record. It made me think of like 28 Days Later, some of the sort of post-rock kind of elements with that sort of thing. Were you influenced by any particular films, or was there sort of things that were kind of going through your head in terms of like how this might be visually represented and things like that?
Well, when I'm thinking about like extremity in films, some like we were talking about all this a lot, and like two examples I kind of always fall back on are the movie Funny Games, which is like a very extreme movie, but that also sort of confronts its own role in like the perpetuation of extreme imagery.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack to that, I mean, it's John Zorn, Naked City, and it's like the diegetic like grindcore like they put on the CD player, and it's just like, yeah, really intense. Like I'm not sure that's something that musically made its way into the record, but it that was like a formational like metal experience for me, like seeing that movie and just being like, holy shit, this is really cool music. And like I mean metal music that, has saxophone and has genre play. I think like, yeah, Naked City is a cool example of that. But the other one, and I saw this like more recently, but the movie Martyrs, it's a French film. And yeah, also, I mean, also a really extreme movie that like really pushes I mean, just pushes like what we can tolerate as like viewers. But at the same time, a movie that's really heavy with like uh moving between genre and like formal considerations. Like it uh it starts as this sort of torture movie, and then goes into this like almost slasher creature film for half an hour or so, and then suddenly just like it like goes deep in all these different directions, and you're with it, with the thread. And I think that is something um personally I was thinking about, like with that sort of genre play, and how to do that in a way that feels cohesive and also uh serious. Like it's not to be flashy, or it's not to be playful. Like I mean, it is playful, but it's not like trolling or making a joke or something like that, or just like too in its own head about the pastiche. It's like a serious expression and a serious like formal exercise. But yeah, I don't know, Richard, I don't know if you have like thoughts about film with the album.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, the thing about, as Leah said, we all like movies, in like these kind of specific ways, I guess, and film for each of us, I think is important in various ways. I mean, just broadly speaking, I'd say that film, cinema, movies, whatever, is kind of probably the most common way in like the contemporary world that we engage with large scale form. I talk about classical music a lot because I love classical music and because of my training in the classical tradition. But the reality is, like, obviously, there are way more people these days who see movies than go to the symphony. But you're talking about like kind of the same time commitment, right? Anywhere between like an hour and a half and 2.5 or 3 hours, and and you're witnessing large scale form, and so within that, uh, there's a lot to take from that, and there's a lot of there are a lot of similarities between the two. So, like for me, thinking about films that are important to me, and especially like films that I've been thinking a lot about over the last few months. It's like, if you ask me 6 months from now, I'll probably tell you a couple other films. But like right now, like things that I've been coming back to and things that formally are really interesting to me. Not only sort of formally, but also metaformally, like the way the form itself is presented, um, are Taste of Cherry, which is a Kiarostami film, Abbas Kiarostami,
Okay.
which is a very interesting film. I mean, essentially, it's about a guy who's contemplating kind of the logistics of his suicide. And no spoilers. I won't tell you what he decides on. But it's really interesting because repetition plays such a fascinating role. It's through repetition that we get introduced to each sort of like crucial character other than him, other than the main character. And he's driving his car around this undeveloped part of town that's in the process of being developed. It's sort of being like whatever they call that when you like sort of terraform something so that you can like build development on it. Um, and so yeah, repetition plays this really interesting role formally. And then another one is Fellini's Juliet of the Spirits, which is also deals with form in an interesting way, with the way that it blends like the dream sequence and then the inner dialogue, and then the way the friends are introduced and the relationship with the friends, and all of her friends are kind of bad friends in a way, like they don't really understand and like the way that all of this is presented kind of formally is so interesting, because in both cases you have these moments where it's like, what is this character doing? Like, where are these coming from? Like, what is this? Is this just completely abstract and absurd? But by the time you get to the end of it, it's like, oh, this is like, this formed a clear, despite the abstract things that happened or the kind of like left field things that happen in these films, there's a very clear narrative arc by the time you get to the end. Reaching the end kind of clarifies things for you, and you're like, oh wow, okay, like I trusted, and when I got to the end, I I I trusted and I believed, and then I like realized sort of what it was all about, and it came together. And that kind of really successful formal construction to me is akin to like, the formal construction of, Beethoven's Ninth or something like that, where I know it's a cliche thing to mention, but talking about the inclusion of a chorus, a choir in a symphony being a new thing, and but it's not just for show. It totally it's totally supported by the music and the sort of ideological direction of the piece itself. So, anyways, that's where I'm at with the film thing right now.
But no, but it's interesting because it's kind of like you just let yourself go, and that's exactly what happened with me listening to the spiritual sound. Like you get maybe 3 seconds head start with that but, and then it's just like the wolves are after you pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
But well, one thing I wanted to sort of touch on, and obviously you can sort of reply to this as kind of like a group or individuals, but what for you is a spiritual sound? Like how is that defined for you?
I guess my answer, yeah, it's a funny like I think of the title as when we like decided to call the album that, it reminded me of like a Ornette Coleman, like his first few records were like, it's like, this is our music, or the shape of jazz to come. It's like this like declarative, like, this is agriculture, like this is the spiritual sound, right? So that was kind of like how I felt about titling the record that. And so I guess like, you know, uh having a spiritual sound is like, we do have the track that's called that is just one specific sound. But I think for me, like spiritual music and spiritual art, what it does is communicate something through form and affect and aesthetics that um that can't be communicated otherwise. And communicating something like uh just internal that has to come through in that form. um that's kind of my thinking about what that means, and being something that is completely sort of honest to that need to be communicated.
What about you, Richard? You're on the hot.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, for me, kind of all music and musical practice is spiritual, right? Like it requires things like sort of practice, repetition, dedication, faith in a way, faith that, especially when you're first starting, it's like, why do my fingers hurt so much? Like, this sucks, and it doesn't sound good, and you just kind of have to have faith. So in a very broad sense, there's that, in that, music is spiritual, and a musical practice can be kind of spiritual in that way. But the other thing for me is that's really important is fellowship. And talking about fellowship, this sort of invisible bond that you have, that you form with your listeners, or as a listener that you form with the artist. I mean, as a kid, I remember feeling, um almost, I know this is silly to say, but almost a personal connection with the musicians that I would listen to. Like, I felt like I almost knew them because I knew them through their music. And it's the kind of, that connection is only made through sound. Like, I don't know those people, and back then, there was no YouTube. I didn't know what their voices sounded like their speaking voices. I didn't know what they, how tall they were, what their, all of these things that, like, somebody that you actually know. So there's this kind of connection through the sound. And I think that, I mean, in that way, the spiritual sound could be whatever it is that you feel binds you to somebody or some group or some power or whatever it is. For us as a band, this is sort of our statement of our spiritual sound. This is a sound that we're putting out, the sound that allows us to generate and maintain fellowship with audience members and listeners and things like this. So yeah, for me, it's kind of broad and abstract, but it's a concept that at the same time is pretty fundamental to music and music practice, in the way that I feel like we get to engage with listeners.
But one of the other things, particularly that really kind of blew me away was the lead playing. Like, honestly, like I feel like the solo in Bodhidharma, especially in My Garden, it was like Dillinger Escape Plan meets Children of Bodom on crack. Like, it was like really, really, yeah, just amazing, man. Like, just sick.
Thank you very much. Thank you for saying that. And yes, children. I mean, love Dillinger Escape Plan. They have some great records and amazing production. And Children of Bodom, R.I.P. Alexi Leho. Love that guy. I mean, I don't know him. I know nothing about his personal life, but I love his playing.
Yeah.
Uh, and Children of Bodom was huge for me growing up. I mean, like, for me, it was like kind of like, I mean, there were a lot of kind of the obvious things, but like two of them, of course, are Eddie Van Halen and Alexi Leho from Children of Bodom. And I just love the way that the thing about Alexi Leho that I always loved is he's super technical. He's got like all the speed and dexterity and all these things, but he's also melodic and also kind of like cheeky, like humorous, in the same way that like a generation before, like Eddie Van Halen was. But like, those things I think are important. I think it's cool. I think it's I think it's cool to be, in the same way that I feel like I think it's cool to have technical ability so that you can realize all of your musical ideas. And also, I think some of those ideas can be off the cuff or fun sounding or humorous, or in the same way that I feel like probably the biggest upside to pursuing intelligence is that your sense of humor becomes more refined. I think like the smarter you are, the better your jokes are, I think, or at least that's kind of like the way I feel. And maybe that's like a really kind of like, I don't know, maybe I'm making light of life in a way that some people don't appreciate, but to me that's just kind of the reality of it. So thank you for saying that. And yes, love Alexi Leho, and thank you for commenting on the leads. I mean, with all of those, I think that, yeah, the idea is always to add more to the depth of the composition of the pieces, but also to bring a sense of kind of fun and levity to it as well. And to me, that's also spiritual. It's just like, I know that there are various like yogic traditions where like laughter is a massive part of it. Shouting and laughter. When I was there was a short period of my life when I was doing a lot of yoga, very short period of my life, but it was about 6 months, and the yoga teacher that I was studying with was the yoga classes I was going to. At the end, there was like a shouting section and then like a laughing section, and I feel like a good guitar solo kind of often has the potential to have both. Like you can have the shouting and you can have the laughing, you can have the squealing, the screeching, the fast runs, but you can also have something that kind of is just like, a bend that's just kind of like, oh, all right, kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
and it has a narrative as well. I think that's one of the most key things of a really good solo is it doesn't just play a million notes per second and everything like
Right.
that. But
Yeah.
equally, talking about your sort of cathartic element of, the yoga, I feel like that is very much prevalent on this record, like the I keep going back to it, but the Bodhidharma bit where it's just like this wall of silence and it's so confrontational where you're just like screaming as loud as you can, Leah. It's mental.
Yeah, I think I was really relating to what Richard was just saying about like um the use of humor, and at least like um I don't know if that moment you're talking about is humorous, but it is like subverting an expectation in a way that I think is something like humor. Like it yeah, and I think that's like something really important to me is like, you know, intensity, seriousness, like we're talking about things that we really mean, that are really heavy about life, and at the same time having a bit of an attitude of mischief about it, a bit of play there, that that doesn't take away from any of that. I think is really part of what we're trying to do. I mean, like, yeah, just like talking about the solos too. Like one of my favorite moments on the album is on the song "Flee." Richard's guitar solo like is this like just like hard rock, like I don't know, Sunset Strip, like sleazy guitar solo, and it's like on the song that like for me is like one of the like thematically heavier songs on the album. And when we were sort of piecing that together and like doing it in production, I remember there was a day where it just clicked that like Richard was trying it out like without completely dry, without reverb, and like I heard him just trying that, and he was like, no, that's probably stupid. Like it was kind of this thing of like, and I was like, no, we got to do that. And he was like, yeah, you're into that, and like we did it, and it's like something I really love about that song in particular, just because like it feels like it should completely interrupt the flow of the song, the like the the intensity of the song, the like the weight of the lyrics. But to me it's like this move that really grounds everything, and like almost the absurdity of it it is like more intense in a sort of way of just like what what is going on here, like why is this happening, and like yeah, I don't know, so I think that like that intensity and that mischief is like really important to us.
Yeah.
It definitely is, and I want to add something because Tristan, you've mentioned that the quiet sections of the sort of verses, as they were, of Bodhidharma a couple times now, and I I want to jump on top of what you're saying and add that I think that uh, one of Leah's greatest gifts is confrontation. Leah does confrontation in a way that I find so compelling, like, and regularly seems to find new ways of presenting confrontation in like music and performance. And those verses in Bodhi, I mean, and live, they feel even more, they're just like deeply confrontational because everything gets so quiet, and then it's just she's screaming at you, and then singing really quietly. There's just like this, like, it's so intimate and so kind of striking. And I think that's talking about each member's sort of natural gifts and the quirks and whatever affinities that they bring. I definitely think that, like, thematically overall, in terms of Leah's artistic contribution, like, these new and like really deeply intimate ways of presenting confrontation, I think, are like serious strengths. And I think that she really nailed it with many moments, and that Bodhi moment is fantastic.
When you have a listener listening to this record, what would you like someone to take away from the spiritual sound, their sort of experience listening to that record?
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, um we talk a lot about like heavy music that gives us comfort, and um I know I've definitely taken that from this album, like in the time since we finished it. Like I will listen to it in a way that I do find really, really comforting, even in its extremity and stuff, or maybe particularly because of its extremity. And I think that that's part of it, is like, yeah, both challenge and comfort. And like walking away from the album, like when you finish the album, hopefully either the feeling is I gotta hear that again, or what the hell did I just hear? Um, and and I gotta take a break. I need to go for a walk or something. I think that's like those are sort of the ideal responses for me.
Yeah, yeah, I'm with that. I feel like there's so much in there that what I like want for a listener to take is whatever they feel like they need to take. I think that and that's not to say that we've like made like an album of comprehensive sounds. So like we've got it all. I'm not saying that, but what I'm saying is that I do feel like yeah, to the point that either you're like, oh my gosh, I want more of that, or oh, like I got my fill, like now I need to chill for a second and just think about what happened. Because I do think that there's a lot between confrontation and sleaze and humor and I don't know, just sort of like what the heck just happened moments and these sort of caressing melodies, and there's so much stuff. There are things that are really abstract and things that are really direct at the same time. I think that like I would want people to relate in whatever way feels right for them. And I hope that all of those things present as kind of invitational in that way.
Yeah, it's a head fuck.
I love that. I'm so glad.
But in the best way possible, honestly. Like
Yes.
it's I've literally got my copy here. It's
Oh, great.
I got I think it's like a like yellow, black, grey splatter
Yes.
variant, that one. But yeah, no, it's absolutely fantastic record. Finally, what would you say that you learned about yourself during the process of this record?
Hmm. I think for me, yeah, I think making this record, that sort of time crunch aspect of it was a big part of the experience of making the record, and being able to with various other things going on in my life, various other like life stresses, and being able to come to the record and the process and meet it and just be like, okay, I'm gonna be creative today. I'm gonna like make decisions and really just like, clock in and make a record and like not wait for inspiration to strike, not wait for clarity to like, just come to me, not like occasionally like knowing when like, okay, we gotta step away and give this space. Like that's also important. But sort of working that muscle of just like, um, you know, is my brain creatively ready for this album, this song today? Am I ready, like, creatively to do a vocal take on this song? Maybe not, but I'm gonna try. And a lot of times, like you know, the days where I thought I wasn't ready to do that, that's the like we got the perfect take, or we figured out the mixing solution, and I think that was big for me with this record.
Yeah, the time crunch definitely from like interior to us, definitely a big kind of defining element. Not the only one, but one of them, for this project. And for me, the thing that came out of that, what I sort of learned, or I don't know if I learned it, but it really it was a lesson in that it reinforced a lesson, and that lesson for me was, um, like, tell the truth. And what I mean by that is, because of the time crunch, there was just enough time to speak the truth and nothing else. Like, there wasn't time to embellish or go back and be like, well, I actually meant this, I actually meant that. It was more like, well, this is it, and like, let's get this right and like lock it in, and then like, next thing. And I think that that was a good practice. I mean, tell the truth, not so much in the sense of like, not that like we're like lying on other recordings or anything like that. And certainly we've had other time crunches with other projects, but like, um but I think there's a lot of like, okay, well, we have to move on, so like, like, do it, say the thing that you need to say, make sure it's right, and then next thing, and just like, let that sit and let that be there. And these days we have so many opportunities and options to change things, and that we have the amount of input we have these days is just like crazy. You could stream anything ever recorded, basically, and like that can shape. But like, to just be like, nope, like, this is it, like, this is my truth in this moment, this is how this goes, and just like let that be. It's like an enormous leap of faith, obviously, but I think seeing things sort of come around on the record, go out there, it's like, okay, like, that's that's a thing I should practice more.
No, amazing. Honestly, I think the record is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, no, it's been a real pleasure to get to speak with you both.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor speaking with you, Tristan.
Yeah, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.